Okay. Thanks for the invite. I don't do a lot of public speaking, but Cindy Teasdale and Tim McFadden both convinced me to come and talk to you, and neither one of them is here today. So I didn't prepare a PowerPoint. I just thought that I would kind of give you kind of a holistic view of how I got to where I am today. And also interspersed in my story, I will point out key lessons that I learned along the way. It all started when my ancestors decided to leave Europe, repressive environments, and they wanted to come to the United States. So both sides of my family, my grandparents came here in the late 1800s, and they had nothing when they came here. The only thing they had was the desire to improve themselves. So my dad would tell me a lot of stories of all the different kinds of businesses that my grandparents and their kids got involved with, and they really had nothing. My father I remember one story he told me, he used to sleep on the ground underneath the wagon that they owned. But they were into all sorts of businesses. They owned bars, chicken slaughterhouse. My dad was a bootlegger for a period of time. And they saved their money, and they lived in Camden, New Jersey, and they saved their money, and my father bought a piece of property in South Jersey, 40 acres of property, and that was kind of the basis for his financial future. And he started and was involved in a lot of different businesses. He owned gas stations, a laundromat, car wash. He developed apartment buildings, single-family housing, a used car dealership, plumbing supply, and he invested in real estate. So why do I tell you all this? Because I grew up in an entrepreneurial environment, and my parents modeled entrepreneurial behavior. My mom worked in the business. She did all the bookkeeping, and my dad was running around all over the place. And I worked in all these businesses. So today, if your washing machine or your dryer breaks, I can fix it. I just fixed my dishwasher, last weekend. So what did I learn from that part of my life? Was that nobody will give you anything. Okay, they had to fight for everything. We were in South Jersey, it's farmland. We were Jewish people, the only Jews in the town, and we heard about it over the years. I'll tell you that. So the other lesson is anything is possible if you work hard enough. And my parents were big believers in education, so they took me out of the public school system in the 4th grade, and I was in private school for the rest of my career. And ultimately, they sent me to high school. They sent me to boarding school, and an all-boys boarding school. Have you seen that movie Dead Poets Society? Okay, that was what my school was like. It really was like that. Hazing, all boys, a lot of rituals, very strict. So when I got to college, I went to the University of Pennsylvania. After having been restricted for 4 years, I kind of went crazy in college. My hair was out to here. Okay, they would call me Wolfman Jack. And I was in the first co-ed dorm at UPenn. And a co-ed, it was called Project Free. And what a co-ed dorm meant then was guys were on the 1st floor, girls were on the 2nd floor, and there were locked doors. So you couldn't go, you couldn't go anywhere. So I proceeded to party pretty heavily in college. I used up every one of my electives in the first 2 years of college. No core courses. I had a 2.0 average, And those were the days when there were no privacy rules for kids, and so my college advisor called up my parents and said, "This guy's going to flunk out. You better do something." And they kicked my ass, and I went back to the advisor, and he told me about this brand new program that they were just going to start called computer science. And I said, "Well, that looks pretty interesting." So I agreed to go into that program. All core courses for the last 2 years, 4.0 average, for the last 2 years, because it really, clicked with me. I also started to show some signs from my future knack of getting publicity. I lived on the 16th floor of a high-rise building, and we created this giant yo-yo made out of bicycle rims. And we were going to drop it out of the 16th floor window, and I got the local television station, one of them, to come and film that in the newspapers. So we were in all the newspapers in Philadelphia. So 1974 comes, I graduate, I take a little time off, and then I come back to my parents' house, and I'm just kind of laying around. And my dad says, "Get out of the house." He says, you got to go get a job. So what do? I've got a computer science degree. I decide to apply to Xerox to become a salesperson, okay? And my hair wasn't out to here, but it was kind of about out to here. I'll never forget this story. I walked into this guy's office. He looks like a Marine drill sergeant. And the first thing he asked me is, "Why do you want to be a salesperson?" And I didn't have a very good answer for that question. And he proceeded to ream me. He said, "I expect people who want to work for me to leave claw marks in the rug trying to get into my office." Needless to say, I didn't get that job. But I did end up working for a consulting company that did critical path management, which is embodied in Microsoft Project, scheduling systems, and I became a COBOL programmer. And if anybody is a developer out here, I was given the job of doing a lot of maintenance programming, working on other people's code that had bugs in it. And let me tell you, that is a great way to learn to code, because you see everybody's bad habits, you see everybody's good habits, and I became a really good programmer that way. And that company had a contract with the U.S. Post Office, and there still is a big postal data center downtown on Market Street. And I used to commute out here from Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and that's where I met my wife. And subsequently, we both quit our jobs and decided to go travel the world. The goal was to travel for about a year. She made it 3 months, I made it 6 months, and then I came back here to St. Louis to pursue her. We ultimately got married. But in 1979, I'm looking for a job, and back in '79, the way to do that was to look in the newspaper at the classified section. There were no online ads. There was no Monster or anything like that. It was a newspaper. And I found a little company here in St. Louis. There was a startup. The owner was an ex-Honeywell engineer. And what he was doing, he was designing with his wife a single board Z80-based computer system that was going to be used to automate asphalt plants, process control. And he wanted to hire me to create accounting systems that he would sell to small business, and he thought there would be cash flow to support the process control side of the business. So I'm a COBOL programmer. I'm going to start working on these newfangled PCs I had no experience doing. I had to write BIOS routines. I had to learn assembly language for microcomputers. I had to put the BIOS routines on the board, Then I put the operating system on the board, and then I had to write an accounting system. Well, remember what I said about my first 2 years in college. Well, one of those courses was accounting, and I got a D in accounting. And so I've got to write a complete double-entry bookkeeping system. How am I going to do that? So I found a company that wrote mini-computer software, and I got a sample packet of all their sample reports. And I took a look at that, and I went, okay, here are my reports. This is what they're going to look like. What do I have to do to create those reports? And so that's how I figured out how accounting really worked. And I wrote a complete double-entry bookkeeping system, general ledger, receivables, payables, inventory. And our first customer was a little company in Cuba, Missouri, a guy that had 2 gas stations. And somehow my boss knew this family. And so the computer was in the file drawer of a desk, and there was a monitor that sat on top, and we had a printer. And I would go down to this company at least 2 or 3 times a week initially, teaching them how to use an accounting system. Well, that little company, some of you probably know, is called Wallace Oil. Turned into a company that's today about an $800 million company. Started out on my software. So that was something I was pretty proud of. And what I learned from that period of time was you really can learn to be good at anything if you put enough hours into it. So the problem there was we couldn't sell enough systems fast enough. They ran out of money, and I was laid off for the first time. And I created a company called NetEffects Systems. It was just me. I took over support of a few clients that we had for the accounting software, but I also had some very unique skills to write assembly language, BIOS routines, and I became an independent contractor working for some companies that were here in town. I subsequently met, a gentleman here in town, and we went into business doing management consulting. I would create RFPs. We would analyze the environments of mid-size and large-size companies. We would create RFPs for software systems that they wanted to obtain. We would run an RFP process, negotiate contracts, and then oversee the implementation. I next started an IT staffing company with a gentleman who actually turned out to be a mentor to me, somebody that I learned a lot about business, people, how to do good business. We focused on growing that company. It grew to about 100 people, and then he sold it. I was not an equity owner in that company. I thought that I was going to have a certain percentage of the proceeds. That turned out not to happen. I did get some money, but it wasn't what I expected. So the lesson that I learned from that experience was get it in writing. Important lesson. And also that when the new owners came in, they decided that they didn't want me to stick around, so they got rid of me. So everybody gets fired at some point if you're an entrepreneur. And so I proceeded to lay on the couch for a couple weeks until I figured out what I wanted to do. And that was 1995, and I started a company called NetEffects, which was ultimately an IT staffing company. But in the very beginning, I wanted to try to capitalize on the internet that was just starting to explode. And I would do public speaking, and I would bring this bulky laptop that I had and a modem, and I would dial up to AOL to get internet, and I would challenge people in a room like this. I would say, give me any topic that you want me to find something about, and I'll find it. Well, I had this secret weapon. It was called Alta Vista. Okay, people remember Alta Vista? That was before Google was on the scene, and Alta Vista was the thing. And so all I would do is just punch it in Alta Vista and say, here, and I put it up on the screen, and you show Thunderbirds or whatever. But really, I focused on building another IT staffing company. And I worked in my basement. It was just myself, a computer, and a fax machine. And I would use these, I would go online and I would use these things called user groups. They're very different from what we talk about today, user groups. It's more analogous to like a forum. There would be an Oracle forum or a COBOL forum or whatever. And people would post questions and other people would answer. And there was all their information there. Their emails, their phone numbers, their addresses. And I marketed to people via email. I would describe it as I would send cold mails to prospects. And that led to ultimately my first client, large client, which was Quest in Minneapolis. And I had never met these people before, but I had ultimately 15 people working in Minneapolis. And I had not met any of my employees, nor any of the clients. But I was able to do business just on the phone and via email. I found a client in Brussels, Belgium, Europay, again, just through the internet. So I was working in my basement in '95. I had 20 people billable before I hired anybody else to help me. And when I did, I had a few people working in my basement with me. They loved working in my house. Tim McFadden's not here, but he's my corporate attorney, and he had been in my house in the basement. So the lesson there is, I hired really good people. 3 of the people that worked for me in the basement are still with me today. So the lesson here is build a good team, hire good people, stay focused, and grow your business. So now we branch out to 2013. NetEffects has got probably close to 200 employees. We're doing business with most of the big companies here in St. Louis. And I have always been interested in what's next, what's new. So in 2013, the company is successful. I have got lots of big clients as customers. And what I wanted to do was cross-sell some new services to these clients. I also wanted to move up the food chain a little bit and do something with a little more value add to our customers. So I created a company with a couple of other guys called Experience Lab. And it was a boutique management consultancy focused on the areas of customer experience. We did journey maps and user experience. And I was very proud of that company. Our first client was Monsanto, and they really liked the kinds of services that we offered, and we made a really tremendous impact in Monsanto. We helped them transform some of their businesses. So today, they have wholeheartedly adopted all of the principles of the business that we were doing, and it made a big difference. We grew that company for 4 years, grew it to about 20 people, and then sold that company at the beginning of 2017. Concurrently about that time, I started to invest locally in mostly tech startups. And that is very addictive, I have found for myself. And if any of you know, I'm sure a lot of you know Brian Matthews, stay away from him, okay? He is an excellent salesperson. I mean, he got me to invest in Locker Dome very early. Those of you who know Gabe Lozano, I remember Gabe came into my office at NetEffects, and he didn't have anything. He had no pitch. I think he was just there to pick up a check.
That's his style.
That is his style. So I like working in the startup world. In 2016, I had an executive from Monsanto in my office, and he was kind of lamenting that he thought he had tapped out all of the IT talent in the St. Louis area. And he had a slide he put up. He had a circle over here, and he had all the names of the big companies in town. He said, Monsanto hires from Boeing, Boeing hires from Express Scripts, and Express Scripts hires from RGA, and the people go around. You see, then there's this other circle over here of all the startup companies. Blocker Dome, Isle 411, all the various names, and they hire from each other. And he said, these circles never intersect. And he said what he wanted to do was he wanted people that were startup-minded, entrepreneurial, and he wasn't able to get that from the staffing companies like NetEffects that he did business with. And so we went off and we kind of noodled on that for a while. We saw this opportunity. So we created a concept that we did not implement yet. But the idea was to work, our clients would be large companies, and we would do software development for them, agile software development, only new stuff, cloud-based software. And the secret sauce that we came up with to hire people was we would give them, our employees, 10% of their time every week to work on their own projects, software ideas, and we would mentor them and support them, and we said we might even fund a good idea that you can come up with. So a few months pass, Monsanto calls again and says, you know that idea that you told us about, we like it, we would like to try it. Well, we have nothing. Okay, the business was not started, but what we did end up negotiating with them was a $2 million contract, okay, to put together 2 teams of agile software developers, and we had no company. Okay, so basically the lesson here is when you see an opportunity, seize it. And what we did was we went down to the CIC at CET, and using all of their tools that are available, we were able to jumpstart this company. All the infrastructure, furniture, telephones, everything, we didn't have to worry about. We just went to the CIC. So that company started, it's not quite 2 years old. It's grown now to about 50 people. And it's been very successful. We crowdsourced the name 1904 Labs, and it's a nod to the 1904 World's Fair, and the idea that the World's Fair has there was a lot of innovation that was announced at the World's Fair, and that's what 1904 Labs is all about. So one other thing that I wanted to mention is my involvement in not-for-profits. I've always been involved in not-for-profits. I started, my first one was in 1998. I got involved with the X Prize. If people remember, it used to be based here in St. Louis. Peter Diamandis and Greg Marinak. It's just something that just excites me. I do, you know, if you ask me what is my life goal, I will answer you to orbit. Okay, that's what I want to do. And I'm very hopeful that I'll be able to do that. I got involved. I gave him a little money, which was the kiss of death, because they would never let me go after that. I volunteered a lot of time. Eric Lindbergh recreated his grandfather's flight in 2002, I think it was. I was the assistant flight director for that. We had a control center in the Science Center. When Bert Rutan was doing his actual competition launches in Mojave, I was the project manager for all the wireless internet and for the website. And after they awarded that prize, we had an organizational meeting out in Google headquarters, and Larry Page, I remember saying, "You guys need to scale this. You need to do lots of prizes. I'll give you some money to start it off," and that's what we did. And so that organization has grown from 2 people to almost 150 people today, and I've been on the board since 2005. I was on the board of the Shakespeare Festival. I got on that board in 2006. So giving back is good for the community, and it's also good for business. So to summarize, the lessons that I've learned in my career, nobody gives you anything. You got to fight for what you want. Anything is possible. You can learn to be good at anything. Focus on building a good team. Stay focused. Grow your company. And if an opportunity presents itself, go for it. And giving back is good for business. So with that, that's my career, and I'll take some questions. There's two sides to that answer, Kim. One, the economy today is so hot that it is draining the talent that's available. I've been in the talent business for 30 years. I've never seen it as hot as it is today. So you've got that going on. It's just everybody's competing for top talent. The other side of it is how to get more talent in the St. Louis market. I think institutions like Launch Code are doing a wonderful job. 1904 Labs is partnering with Launch Code to help utilize some of the talent that they develop by accelerating our profile with things like you're doing, CIC, the Cortex, the T-Rex area, Arch Grants, everything is building up, raising our profile, our brand, and companies like 1904 Labs, our model is so attractive to people. We have started to recruit people from other cities to come to St. Louis. So I think it's just, step by step, we have to do little things to increase the level of talent. But I am hopeful. Yes.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah, there's NetEffects. I have a dozen recruiters, okay, and they're recruiting people from all over the world. People that are moving here with their spouses, people that want to come here for a particular job. We hire people from out of the country that are here on H-1B visas, or students that are graduating from college, with technical degrees in some of these newer areas like decision science. It's getting easier to find jobs for recent grads because the talent market is tight. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we are good at coming up with ideas for new businesses. We're good in some broad areas like ag and finance. I think what we need to work on as a community is changing how people perceive St. Louis. I don't want to be a flyover community. I think we have a lot to offer here. two companies. It's a very good place to raise family. So we need to work on changing our image nationally and getting out the word, what we really have here. And also, we need to work on capital, more access to capital, Series A, Series B type environments, because a lot of companies will just take off for the coast where they perceive, and really the facts are there is more money available. Yeah, that's a very good question, and I'll speak to you from the two companies that I have. NetEffects is an IT staffing company. People are always coming and going in that business. Our average tenure is probably 15 months. 1904 Labs, however, because of the culture that we are building and the way we are engaging our employees in figuring out their future. For every person we hire at 1904 Labs, day one they get a copy of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. Okay, and we talk about that book, at lunches. We're very transparent on how we run the company. We ask for everyone's feedback on how they want the company to operate. Well, we've had virtually no turnover in almost 2 years. And these are typically millennials. So millennials want to participate in their future, policy making, and I see that as the way for companies to retain staff. It's keep them engaged. And another thing that we do is we have a very active outreach program at 1904 Labs. We're in the cortex, and we have made decisions that we want to support the local community that surrounds the cortex. So we've done things like we partnered with Lift for Life Academy, and we did a 9-week program where we taught kids how to program. And it was pretty amazing to see how excited these kids were to think that, they could have a future in software development. So millennials want to be involved in outreach.
Please give Jack a warm hand.